Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Indieside podcast, the podcast for independent creatives. I'm here today with Dr. Shida Ketzer, a independent fantasy author. Shida, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm as your introduction was already great, and I would only add that I've been writing, of course, for a long time, but I started self-publishing in November, so I actually released my book, Killer Quill, and on my birthday on November 15th. And I thought, I don't know, I thought if I'm allowed to give myself a birthday gift would be getting published. I've been querying for a very long time, and um, this book uh, actually is part of the larger manuscript. I think that fantasy readers are used to this, that the books are always huge. So this was a longer book. It wasn't huge. It was only 120, well, actually 115,000 words, which for fantasy is just like maybe a novella. Um, but I had to cut it, and I cut out an entire character and some friends of this character, all of it completely cut it out. And I'm still querying the other work, not really hoping much, but I got to publish this, and I'm very pleased with the results. I'm blessed. So thank you for having me to talk about my book and my writing.
Thank you for being here, and that is a great birthday present to yourself, getting published, and it was great to see a copy of the book in person as well. And you were talking about it being part of a longer work. That's one of the things I wanted to ask about, because when I was on your website, I could see that while you only have the debut novel Killer Quill out now, I noticed that you have quite a large plan on your website of interlinked fantasy books within the wider universe. So, what can you tell us about those books?
So I decided to put all of the things that I write in a larger fantasy universe called the Bistroverse. And online, I'm always in basically all the social media platform. My handle username is always Bistroverse, not my own, pen name or my own name. And uh, that is so for people who only see this one book, they're thinking like, what is Westeros? And it's actually is supposed to be 1024 different solar systems, but of course I haven't written like a fraction of that. But a lot of things I've written so far are based on one planet, like a fictional, well, it is in my head. So, for a writer, is always everything is has to be real. Otherwise, you cannot write it. So I would actually think about what could happen, and everything has to make sense and be realistic within that scope. But I have a little map of it here. You can see, of course, a better version. There is one in the book, but also the high resolution and colored version is on the website. I don't know if it actually mirrors it, so I'm not really sure if you see everything mirrored. But there are many continents here, and this is half of the planet, obviously. So I thought of it as more of you know the whole things. When I was writing this, I thought about how a lot of fantasy, they are either very close to what we have. You could, I probably better not to name names, but there were some very popular fantasy words that are like map of the UK, and they just like change the names, or there are some that I'm one of those who, when I see a book in a bookstore, I first thing I look at the map, and a lot of times, unfortunately, I get disappointed by the map being too simple and too, I don't know, like a lot of names is like the big sea and the like unpenetrable mountains or things like that, and mm, I mean, I respect all of those, and I think they're great stories. But for a person who cared about, that aspect, also the world building is the top reason I read fantasy, because I believe that is actually what makes fantasy, the setting. I don't see fantasy as a genre. I see it as a setting. So you can have horror, you can have mystery, thriller. Now we're having romance, everything, but the fantasy is the setting. Is this um, for me at least, this secondary word, this and the more um, bizarre, I like it better. So for this particular case, I thought of like planet that it is actually explained not in this book particularly, but in the bigger, the main manuscript that will either get picked by an agent or publisher, or in worst case, then I would think that, okay, latest in a year, I would just self-publish it, and I hope that it would even receive more attention than this one. Like more, well, it's not so much the attention, but like the readership, the like, the enjoyment that I'm hearing from people. So this planet is um, created by its god, Wisdera, um, long time ago. So Wisdera is like 10 millennia old, and she is a very young god for god standards. And when she was learning, when she was like getting godly education, and these gods are not like Greek gods that are like planet based, they're in a larger, so they create different planets and different realms. So she was like in her rebellious years, only a few millennia old, and she created something that wanted to be the antithesis to all planetary standards. So instead of making it round or roundish shape, she actually created something that looks like a lentil or a lens. So it's kind of like this sort of shape. And on the edges, there are these sort of jagged mountains. So it's basically like an eye. And the pole, because for me was the situation, and I've seen so many maps, and Norse is always cold. And like, you have like the poles. So the pole is actually the center, and this is 100% dark. And the back of the planet is basically covered in dunes, and is tidal locked to the sun, so it's not so much habitable. And my main character here, the quill, she actually comes from there, and they live underground. But there's one chapter where it happens there in that part of the planet, but most of it is on the, let's say, the dark side. So this is actually the dark side, but it is as bright as here, because there is a sort of moon that is concave and would transfer, basically reflect the sun from behind the planet here. So you would get that around it is very bright and hot. And when you go to the center, is quite gloomy. And the part that most of the story happens is a capital city. I call it Linksville City. Linksville is actually inspired by a very small town close to here. A lot of names here I either took from random villages that I thought the names were either funny or strange, and some of them are just German words, because it's a it's inspired by Prussia, so it's a Germanic inspired word. And some of these names are just like they mean like a pile of dead wood or something like that. So it's a little bit of inside joke for anyone who understands it. And the end of the book has like a glossary of names where I'm explaining all of this. And the pronunciation that took me a lot of time. I I kind of regretted it halfway through, but I had to do it. So the pronunciation, and I have the audio, like I pronounce them, and I have the whole audio on my page for people to listen to, because that's also one of the, I think, quirks or weird things about me. I really care about knowing how to pronounce these things when I read another book. So yes.
That's a good thing because I've read some sometimes, so I think I would never be able to read that out loud because I couldn't say it. But I mean, wow, that is huge amount of world building and with the maps and the detail. And I will put a link to your website in the description of the video as well, so people can go and see that in more detail and look at that, because to me that is awe-inspiring, because I'm a total pantser, as writers tend to say. I can't plan things to that level at all, with the links to future projects and the illustrated map and just the amount of detail. So how did you start with planning something of this scale, and where did the inspiration to do such a big project come from?
Thank you. So I think there's this truth that people always wish things that they don't have and wish something else. And I wish I could be a pantser, because I have so many stories in my head, and sometimes I stopped writing a story because I already knew what's going to happen. So I knew the whole thing, and it just didn't absorb me anymore. I kind of lost interest in it because there was no mystery anymore, even though I still believe that the story would have been really interesting, but it no longer was new to me. It was no longer something that I needed to explore. And sometimes I wish I even tried to pan something basically, and I couldn't, because um, I'm so, like, I'm a type of person who like, when I have a doctor's appointment and I write the time, okay, I have to be there at this, and then when I have to leave the house, when I have to get ready, when I have to, so I backward time everything. So I'm a bit, um I'm like this in my life. So it is not such a stretch and such a um strange thing. That is how I work, that is how my brain works. But while I was writing this, so I started writing, and I kept, so the map didn't come from beginning, but a lot of it was already in my mind. And the more I wrote, the more it felt like, oh, okay, so whether, so um one thing that I have a scientific background, so I studied informatics, computer science, computer vision. So one of the things that I learned from back then when I was writing a scientific article was that um, before we before we finished the work, I would start writing it, and I learned that from more experienced people, people who were kind of my mentors, and they gave me this idea to start um, like writing a formula first before I program what I wanted the experiment and what I wanted the algorithm to do. because a lot of times while I was trying to write it, I realized, oh, this actually, I cannot make that sound like this formula doesn't add up. So even though the method seems to be working, there should be something wrong with it. And that is one of those parts that when you try to put these together and to try to make this um, function. So when I create this map and I think, oh, that could not actually happen in this scenario, no matter how bizarre this is. So I'm going with something that it's so removed from our world. There are things that, I mean, there's magic, and people always say, okay, well, where do you stop that, right? Why don't you say, well, then magic happened and then solve this plot hole? But um, the way that you can make fantasy um, work is that you make it internally consistent. So that's what matters. That even if you say, I I always find it a good example with this old, I think, kid joke that they say like, how do you fit an elephant in the fridge? And um, then afterwards, like you just, open the door and put the elephant. And then when you want to put a giraffe in the fridge, so the story is that you have to open the fridge door, remove the elephant, and put the giraffe. So as crazy as um, that is how, in a way, um, this is necessary for a fantasy world that is internally consistent. So that is an important part of anything that, like, especially fantasy, because I think real world has certain boundaries that people just have in their minds. But for fantasy to, when people read it and they say, oh, that could not happen, I could actually explain exactly how this could happen, even if I hadn't thought about it before, because there is this internal consistency. So it's kind of feels like intuitive, the same way that gravity works. So that is one of the aspects. And for writing it, the book itself, as I said, this was a different story. This was a story that was kind of like my own life, my own, like a character based on me, kind of like a memoir dressed as fantasy, which helps, you know, with, okay, I don't have to worry about offending anyone or changing the names, because I could be talking about this country and that. I could talk about certain religion or certain, I don't know, culture, and nobody gets offended because they're not, they each of them are maybe representative of something, but they're not named as that, and they're different enough. So the original thing was that, my story, and then I wanted in that story to be like, I needed an assassin, because that story starts with um, having, I want to subvert everything, right? Already the planet is that idea. So the story like I wanted the story to start with the orphaned chosen one to be assassinated, and then the main character starts as no one, as me, as someone who never gets chosen. Like even in a school playground, I would be like, when they were trying kids to make teams, they were like, okay, so we actually prefer to have one member fewer and not pick her, because so this is the type of, I think a lot of writers and readers do feel like that, actually, in fantasy, demographic. So there I wanted to have a cool assassin, and I just had this idea that, what if there was this assassin that killed with a quill, like an actual quill. Um, and then I made her cooler than, what I would have made my main character. Um, and I personally think, like, people talk about, like, would she hang out with? I don't think she would hang out with me. I think she's too cool for, you know. She would probably just, you know, take one look at me and like, no, girl. But so because I still like the idea of killing the character on the first page, so she actually like that happens to her, and the first line of the book is Quill turned 16 on the day she died. So I like to kill my character on the first page, the first line, and then start the story, because I believe in, I don't believe in ending with cliffhanger. I believe in starting at a cliffhanger and then going off.
Yeah, that's a really gripping way to get their attention, and I've never heard of a character being killed on the first page, so it's a really unique hook for that. I feel what you were saying as well about the characters, because I think most writers and readers are kind of introverted, and we're not the popular kids, so we can make these cool characters and make them what we want to be. And in a big universe like yours, you've got a lot of scope to do that. Well, as you said earlier, kind of making it not make sense for our world, but making sure that there's rules and there is a sense of what should and shouldn't happen. So this is obviously Killer Quill is out there, that's done, and you mentioned the bigger project that you are hoping to get queried, and you said you had like a timescale of about a year before you would maybe put that out. Is that probably going to be your next release, or do you have any other future plans that you'd like to talk about?
Hopefully that will be the next. And because I kind of, you know, I wrote it in a year, and it was a complicated year. I actually had, um, you know, I've heard that some of the issues right now with, particularly also with traditional publishing, is that because of the corona lockdowns, a lot of people, um, well, their lives changed, and maybe they also had more time to write. But very important aspect was this existential crisis, like what I'm doing with my life. So obviously, I had that too. And I was working as a scientific staff, as a basically, I had my informatics PhD, and I was happy with kind of that. What I think wasn't really my dream. I mean, I do like a lot of it, and I was always a nerd, so I was nerd before it was cool to be a nerd. I was actually, I used to wear glasses, and um, sorry, but I think
I know the
that is part.
stereotype. It's okay. You can say it. I'm not offended.
I am. I still consider myself like part of that. The glasses, I had actually a LASIK surgery, so, and the reason for that was because I was. It wasn't because I wanted to even be cool. It was because um, I I had a problem that when I laid on, like when I was on the couch and like watching something, and the glasses would bother me, and I couldn't put on contact lenses. Like, no chance. I could not
I've never
ever
been
do it.
brave enough to do that.
I've never done it, so I couldn't even, like, the idea just hurt. So that was why I got my eye surgery because I wanted to lay on the couch and watch, 100 episodes of something. Um, and um, so I was always this nerd, and being in that world, being doing what I did, and my studies and my career, that was all part of it. But there was a moment when I had a very very difficult situation that like kind of my whole life collapsed, and it was really intense. It was like a character being like, in your stories always you pull the rug from under them, and like everything collapses and the character is completely like, I have that. I have um one, like in one of these chapters of this particular book and also the others, but this book there is actually a scene that my character is on their back on the hard floor. So this literally happens. And in that moment, I kept wondering what I really want to do. So I decided I mean, after a lot of soul searching and existential crisis, I decided that is what I like, at least that one story I wanted to tell. And of course, when you do that, when you achieve it, it's such a high, such a thing that you just want to have again and again. I have been in a bit of writing slump, or I don't know if you can call it a block, but it has been hard for me to write because um, during this 2 3 years that I was working on getting that one manuscript agented, so to get it traditionally published, um, I revised it so many times. I said I polished it so much I can see my own reflection. It's it doesn't even like it's a they're so different now, and so much has been fixed in it. And at this point, I feel like it just has to get out, and I should stop revising this. So I'm working on right now. I would say, like, honestly, because I, writers, we have 100 different work in progress. But two things that I'm really pushing myself to like focus on. One is another story set in the same war, but so here with this book I focused on this sort of Germanic big country that is kind of like they have this sort of industrial and like their industrial power, and they want to kind of take over the whole world if they could, so it's a bit, I guess, worrisome, the idea of it, but it's kind of um, inspired by 1870s Prussia. And then I have these sort of like islands that I got it inspired by Catalonia, because I lived there and I did my master's and PhD in Catalonia and close to Barcelona. So I'm setting the next book, the one that I hope, you know, whenever my perfectionist mind can be like, okay, just next line and like, stop editing this. So I wanted this to be a villain story. It also starts with a very like I wouldn't want to spoil it, but it also starts with like the villain in a very um, perilous situation. And this is about someone who like maybe started as me, a version of me, and then lost everything, completely got crushed mostly by also society, and they lost all their reputation and career and friends. Everyone turned their back to them, and they were completely like had no other thing, like hitting complete rock bottom. And then they're thinking, okay, what now I can do after this. And so when I had this, when this other writer read this and said, I feel seen, and told me her story, this was the best. Like I was very sorry that that a person went through that, but I also felt that enough of um this um this born on a farm, um this boy who is orphan and somehow great, existing for greatness, and you know we are not that. He exists, but he's overrepresented in stories. And there's so many of um, those of us who are not a celebrity, who are not a prince, who we want to see that we exist, that we are not alone. So that was my point, that I want, that is what draws me to these stories. And um I avoid dystopian, to be honest. I think I only have this one kind of like dystopian idea, and that's already making it hard, the dystopian part, because it depresses me so much. And it's because I lived in a very cyberpunk dystopian, really 1984 sort of environment. And I'm trying to put this real human experience. Each person is different, so they're all over the world experiences, but there's a level that we connect to. And sorry, I don't know, I cannot see you, so I'm not sure if the connection is lost or.
Yeah, it just sort of flickered for me for a minute. I don't know quite what happened. It's okay now on my end. Is it okay for you?
Yes, so the thing is, I wasn't sure if it was on my side, um because of course I can see myself, but it's just my phone showing me, so I didn't know if the connection on my side was the problem
It
or
was both of us
um
on my end that I couldn't see anything for a minute, so I think it might have been my laptop. It's okay because I still have the audio of what you were saying, so I'll just put that in the video and it should all come through well. And I follow what you're saying with being able to relate to and identify with character experiences rather than something that seems so far removed from most people that it's just not credible. Like a lot of the classic chosen one scenarios that don't represent anybody really, and it's more to do with real human experience and characters you can identify with, which is great to see. And obviously within fantasy and sci-fi and speculative genres you can do more with that because you're not bound by the truth, so it's human characters but without the same boundaries of the real world.
exactly.
I wanted to discuss something quite topical to do with representation and to do with things that I've seen on your social media, because there's been this increase in people saying there's a lack of work that appeals to a male audience, and that your work has proved quite popular with a male audience because it's quite dark, it's gritty, and it's got what they call well written violence, which can be quite hard to do in a real setting. So was that actually an intentional thing, or has it been sort of a happy accident? And how do you feel about the topic of that representation?
Okay, so my goal um, was actually to uh, give representation to people like me, because I grew up thinking that I was the odd one out, and like the black sheep and the weird, and I always had to mask it and not be myself. Like basically people being like, could you just like not be yourself? Like just
Just being told to
try.
tone it down all the time.
Yes. Yes. And so we have this neurodivergent concept that is, people are like, oh, people were neurodivergent. Well, we were. We were all neurodivergent. We were just told to like act normal. Like we were, so I grew up thinking that like I don't know, like it was a gene mutation that I became some sort of, I felt like an alien, you know, and I felt, well, it did help me a lot to, live in different countries, and a lot of times be in, um, groups, working, like, oh, starting to sound like I'm writing like a cover letter for a job, but like work in a very like international environment. And that was the case because like I didn't have this baseline of what is okay like in my head, because everything for me were different. So as much as I was weird for the people around me, they were all weird, because um there's like they would do things that I would never understand. Like what is, I always try to find like kind of infer what is the rule. Like, are we allowed to talk behind someone's back? But then when the person is there, we just say, oh, you're the best person ever. Oh, I missed you. You're my best friend. And I didn't get it. I couldn't understand how people would say things they don't mean. Um, and then they would laugh at me for believing something. I completely was like, I didn't get it. It was just, so a lot of times I was trying, and it wasn't, it was a survival thing. So I just wanted to not attract attention, ideally, because sometimes people think like, people see me online and they're like, oh, you're just seeking attention. I was like, no, honestly, me inside, I want to be invisible. I just want to not exist. Like I want to be like, that nobody even sees me. But I have to eat, and that's a big issue. So I have to live somewhere, and so you have to do what you have to do. And I don't have um any means of promoting this book other than social media. um and I do really need the, I don't know, 2 cents of royalty that every every time I'm like, one person bought it. So you know this is the situation that um I was, because I didn't have a baseline for um what is normal, right? It was just like whatever, not me, right? That is normal. So I went to different countries, and it helped me really like fit with something really strange. So I remember the first time when I was like, it was my first days in a group in vicinity of Barcelona. So where I did my research, I did my PhD studies, and this IT assistant joined the group. And so I wasn't used to that, because ITs, you feel like there's always like this boring sort of pasty, but he had like dreadlocks and tattoos everywhere and piercings and things like that. And he just hugged me and kissed me on the cheeks, like, and I just looked like from like, aside of him, I looked at the room and nobody was like, oh my God, like what is happening? So I immediately realized, okay, that is the culture. So so for me, it helped that I didn't have a baseline of, I know that in Germany or in France or in Spain or I don't know, in the Middle East, or for me, it's much easier uh, to kind of fit with, like, because I'm always, trying, but also that is a point with also fantasy, because I had to make a sense of things. I had to figure out culture as an point of view of an alien. So I'm always thinking like, so sometimes I joke that, I'm like 300 something years old and I'm an alien who landed here through a portal and I just cannot find my way back. So I'm kind of trying to pretend to be one of the people. So for me, that also helps with writing the fantasy, because um, every culture, every religion, everything in this book, and all the things that I write, it is inspired by something, like maybe inspired by Germany, or like sometimes people know and like, oh, I know this country is like Iltana is this, and like Linkswil is that country, and like this is like, so sometimes people catch me because they know a lot already about me. So, but I also feel that it is much easier to um, when you make sort of a social or some sort of critic. Um, if you're talking about the religion they have this. People have this sort of defensiveness that is instilled in them. But if you name it something else, then they like, oh, like this makes no sense. Oh, poor this character. I was like,
Mm.
you know that it's basically you, that you did the same thing. But okay, so Quill, my character, she's actually the only one with red blood, and everyone else has different colors of blood, and her people get hunted down and killed because of their red blood, because they are the only ones who can perceive red color. So I'm thinking, okay, I have a background in computer vision and human perception, so I'm aware of like, so I this comes a bit from my own scientific background. But so we have the um, color spectrum, the light spectrum, and only her people can see reddish shades and hues. So people other than her people, um, they see red as some sort of like grayish. So they think these are devil or whatever.
Mm.
So they're thinking that they are evil incarnate. And I felt like, if I just say, okay, because she has a different skin color too, but people have bias about that. But when a reader reads this and thinks, okay, well, she's haunted because of red blood, not because of her skin. So I think this is easier to relate to. Sorry, I just realized, I guess because I'm neurodivergent too, that you asked me about male, like, the typical, um, right. So why this? And I think my goal was I wanted to have this. I grew up with classical fantasy where a character like me was either the he gets the girl, so I was the girl
Yeah.
prize, or I was the villain because a lot of villains are neurodivergent if you think
Mm.
about it. And so I would be the, I wouldn't be the hero in any of these books. And I find it a bit strange because people are now talking about, oh, like, why they have to be like, so a lot of male, even friends, readers and writers, they say, oh, but like now it's all for women. And I feel like, when I grew up, I had no choice. I related to this orphan white farm boy. Um, and it was fine. I mean, I felt a little bit left out or a lot left out, but I guess that was the norm for me. So I related to him and I found I could put myself in his place. Um, but I'm surprised that I think because they never have, they, I feel like that is also a situation with people who are not used to being the odd one when they are in a different country or a different culture or a
Mm.
different scenario, that they don't have this abilities that we grew up learning. So they feel like, oh, what should I do? Like, this is not about me. Like, okay, like nothing was about me, but like I turned out okay. I think I turned out okay. I probably didn't, but so for me, I wrote the book for, let's say, for myself, but more importantly, because I realized there are other people like me. That was a revelation that there are people who think and feel like me. So I wrote it for them, and I thought that it would not appeal to men per se because I wasn't one. Still, I'm not. But it seems that because I'm not a romantic person, and this book particularly has zero romance, the other books do have more because my characters couldn't keep themselves from, getting involved with each other. I really didn't want to. Like, I told them not to, and then they just end up. I have a point in one of my stories where these two characters were supposed to be like BFFs, and then I feel like close to the feeling of being possessed as I typed a scene of them being together, and I was like, what came out of me? Like, the characters really wanted this to be
Sometimes they
there,
just
and
take over, don't they?
I felt like I was like, what is this I'm writing? But so yeah, maybe the fact that a lot of people, a lot of men also connected with this is because, well, I wrote it for myself, and it turned out that it's not about gender. So I kind of, you know, a lot of times my issue is that people say, oh, now you have to be a person of color and a woman and LGBT, and that's not like, look at me. I did not get published by anyone other than myself. So no, like, I tick all of the boxes of diversity, and I have to, I'm trying to, like, not be very open about, because it's nobody's business. Like, I feel like it's my personal life. It's my, and it was very traumatic. So I don't want to, like, um, advertise it out there. But every single agent that I queried, I had to say what my, you know, why I'm, this is own
Mm.
voice, let's say. And I had to tell something that was private to me to, I think, about 200 agents and their assistants, none of whom, they all wrote cannot relate or is not a fit with their work. So I think that. you know, writing for like books for women, it's not just let's just put romance and everything. And writing for a diverse audience is not just let's have that Hallmark or Disney, but just make them a person of color, or make them LGBT, or make them. It's not. It's not Snow White, but not white. That's for me. It is as if like they threw me some crumbs, and that
Mm.
is not what I want. My story isn't that. So I think that diversity is about having different stories. Having stories that, like, I read a lot. Male authors write about war, and I would say 99% of them never seen one. I was born in a war, in an active war zone. So I actually have a very negative view of war. So I think that, um, you know, I believe that if the story comes from the human perspective, that is the human, let's say what the people say, the human condition, it transcends identity. So if I wrote something that a woman on the other side of the planet read it and felt seen, even though we have, like, the only thing we have in common is that we both write and we are both women. Everything else were different. We had so different backgrounds. And if she feels seen by that, why wouldn't a man?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think your unique experiences that you talked about earlier on about feeling like an alien looking in gives you a better chance to write something that's relatable to lots of different people because you're not coming from a place of everything has to be about me. You're not coming from that place of being the main character, what they call main character syndrome. You've had that experience, so you could write something that lots of different people can relate to based on your own experiences. And yeah, we've covered a lot of things there, a lot of things about culture, about religion, about characters, about relatability in fiction, and it's all been a really wonderful conversation. Before we bring this to an end, do you have any advice for other writers or for aspiring writers?
Um, so I am, you know, I'm not experienced enough, successful enough for giving advice. What I can give advice, if I may, is from point of things not to do, because there were a lot of things that don't work and things that I wish I knew before. And I feel like, okay, one point was always that there were so many advices of you have to do this, you have to do that, and this is not right. And there are so many rules that aren't rules. And even the people who tell them, and if you like, I did research some of them and realize that people who are like spearheading that like, talk about this, they are famous for breaking them. So it is good to think that these are sort of like best practice for when to get you started. If you just feel yourself like you just dropped into this sea and you don't know how to swim, so maybe they're your arm floaties, like, kind of keeping you afloat, but they are not sacred rules. And I take issue with people who, especially like well-meaning better readers or critics, that they see this and they're like, no, like, how dare you? Like, this is horrible. And no, um, we don't want to, like, the last thing anyone should, want to do is to limit creativity. So even now, I sometimes when I'm typing, I feel like I have like people looking over my shoulder and like clicking their tongues and like just I type and they're like, no, just I feel this being criticized as I type because of I can hear the voices of um, very well-meaning people in my head that say, "No, oh, you use the filter word. Oh, you use an adjective or adverb," and I feel like I'm also trying to become. I'm trying to do a certificate to become English teacher, and when I was learning like some of the things, because they say, okay, well, how do you teach, to non-natives? I'm not native, to be honest, but you know, and they say like for example, the order of adjectives in English language, and I was just laughing at this because, of course, that exists, and you have to teach it, and you have to, and honestly, every time that I need it, I Google it because I cannot. It sometimes feels um like that's the right way, but I still don't remember the rule. And it makes me laugh because, like, if you write something and you have like two ad- two adjectives back to back, and someone will be like, no, pick one. Like, you cannot have a sword that is tall and wide. You cannot have a tree that is like, I don't know, gnarled and green or something. They just like people. I had someone saying one adjective per paragraph.